Hello and welcome to our presentation all about John Buchan's Inspirational Holidays. This presentation has been designed to illustrate how John Buchan used many of the aspects of the various times he was on holiday to either take the time to develop a novel or use some specific elements within novels. The following slides relate these to specific novels. I shall hand you over to Peter to tell you something about one of JB's family holidays in Kent.
Thank you, David. I will start with John Buchan's shocker, The 39 Steps. He wrote The 39 Steps in a few weeks towards the end of 1914, while staying with his wife and two children at Broadstairs in Kent. While there, Buchan became seriously ill with the duodenal problems that were to plague him all his life, and which prevented him from joining the army, Britain having declared war against Germany on the 4th of August in 1914. On a summer's day in 1914, a 39-year-old man walks with his small daughter down a rickety flight of steps leading to a private beach from a house on the cliff top. The girl, just turned 6, is improving her counting by determinedly calling out the number of each step. 38, 39, she says in triumph as they step off onto the sand. Thus, Alice Buchan gave the title to her father's new novel. Buchan had originally called the novel The Black Stone. He then suggested Kennels of War, before he and Blackwood, the publishers, agreed on the 39 Steps. In the 1940s, that area of Broadstairs was redeveloped. The old steps built into the chalk cliff face were torn out and replaced. A literate builder or developer saved a piece of the 39th step and sent it to John Buchan's family. Today, you will find that piece of step in our museum. As a boy, John Buchan spent many family holidays in Peeblesshire. John Burnett of Barnes stems from his many boyhood holidays spent at Broughton, where his grandparents lived. Similarly, Sir Quixote of the Moors and Scholar Gypsies were also very influenced by Buchan's early wanderings in the Borders. Later, John Buchan wrote Witchwood, which he regarded as his favourite novel. In it, a young Kirk minister, David Sempill, has the care of souls in a benighted parish in Tweeddale, called Woody Lee, which is based on the village and surrounding areas of Broughton. One of the roads in Broughton is called Woody Lee in memory of John Buchan. David will now guide you through John Buchan's mountaineering exploits.
Thanks, Peter. John Buchan was a great mountaineer, and in June of 1906 visited Zermatt and Chamonix, where he sent a letter to Clara, which was his pet name for his fiancée, who later became his wife. The letter describes a difficult journey getting there by train and boat, and how his sister Anna complained about the scenery and JB's awful jokes. He also describes one of the climbs he undertook. On Monday we had a very tiring day. We took to an easy mountain called the Brevent, without guides, and we struck out on a route of our own and had 5 or 6 hours' work climbing loose rocks and new snow. His love of climbing was so great that he arranged his honeymoon to go climbing in Chamonix. When they got there, Susan was not so enamoured in climbing, and one of the exhibits in the museum tells you the full story. In September of 1906, John Buchan visited the Isle of Skye with Anna and Willie to climb the Cuillins and stayed at the Sligachen Inn, where he wrote to Susan Grosvenor, also known as Clara. If this letter is worse written than usual, please forgive me. For in search of the missing mountain, I've been climbing all day. I've scratched my hands. We're all wrecks, my sister, my brother and myself. Our ankles, unlike the quality of mercy, are more or less strained, and our complexions are very battered. On Sunday we walked 25 miles over very rough moorland, and today we have been up a new climb on Sigur na Gillian. Let's look at how he used these climbing experiences in some of his novels. Buchan called on his early climbing experiences in The Three Hostages. Across that corrie was the first of the great buttresses which Sigur Diarg sends down to the Riascul. It was a famous pinnacle ridge, as mountaineers called it. I had climbed it 3 weeks before and found it pretty stiff, but then I had kept the ridge all the way from the valley bottom, and I did not see any practicable road up the corrie face of it, which seemed nothing but slabs and rotten rocks, while the few chimneys had ugly overhangs. And from Mr. Standfast: in my time I had done a lot of scrambling on rocks and used to promise myself a season in the Alps to test myself in the big peaks. If ever I go, it will be to climb the honest rock towers around Chamonix, for I won't have anything to do with snow mountains. That day on the Col della Rondini fairly sickened me of ice. I dare say I might have liked it if I had done it in a holiday mood, at leisure and in good spirits. Let me pass you back to Peter to tell you where the idea of John McNab came from.
The British Colonial Service diplomat Gerard Craig Seller inherited the vast Scottish West Islands estate of Ardtornish in 1909. Its potential for waterborne sport interested him much more than the hunting, shooting and fishing usually associated with such places. John and Susan Buchan spent many a happy holiday at Ardtornish, where he gathered much information for his popular story, John McNab. Not only did Seller inherit the beautifully wild 40,000-acre estate set in the magnificent sailing waters of the Forth of Lorne and the Sound of Mull, but also the stately 1902 Cox and King designed 555-ton steam yacht, Rannoch. It was so stately that in later life she will become the Italian Royal Yacht. In the spring of 1910, John and Susan Buchan had travelled on the Orient Express through the Balkans to Constantinople, where they joined Seller on his yacht the Rannoch for a month's cruise in the Aegean. They visited Mount Olympus in Troy, where they had a guard of Turkish soldiers, sailed among the islands of the Aegean, visited the Acropolis and the Parthenon, saw Delphi and climbed Parnassus, before returning via Venice. Buchan wrote from Corfu to Charles Dick: Constantinople is pure Arabian Nights. My experiences varied from lunching in state with the Sultan's brother and dining at embassies to chaffering with Kurds for carpets in a sort of underground bazaar. I don't know any place where one feels history more vividly. These scenes will come in useful in writing Green Mantle. The holiday also inspired the short story The Lemnian, written after seeing the battlefield at Thermopylae, and the short story Basileia, in which the hero, led by a recurrent dream, rescues the heroine from a satyr-like Greek. This was later expanded into The Dancing Floor, published in 1926. In 1911, John Buchan stayed at Rosensee in Bavaria, a small house with only half a dozen rooms, situated in a garden almost at the foot of Germany's highest mountain, the Zugspitze. John and Susie Buchan spent some time there, and he had to acknowledge that the Bavarian highlands, though different, were not inferior in beauty to his Scottish home. These experiences were used a few years later in Green Mantle. Here I was, with nothing except what I stood up in, including a coat and a cap that weren't mine, alone in midwinter in the heart of South Germany. There was a man behind me looking for my blood, and soon there would be a hue and cry for me up and down the land. John Buchan also drew on the holiday for background in A Prince of Captivity and the Hunting Tower trilogy. It was while climbing the Alpspitze with a young forester on that particular Bavarian holiday that Buchan, always sensitive to atmosphere, had the premonition of a hostile spirit watching him, which he later described in his memoirs. David will now talk about Buchan's Norwegian and Azores holidays.
Throughout his life, John Buchan loved fishing. From his early boyhood escapades guddling for trout, right through to his time in Canada. For the summers of 1911 and 1912, he went with Tommy Nelson to fish the swiftly flowing waters of the Liardal in Norway. And he used these specific experiences when writing sections of The Three Hostages and The Island of Sheep. Let me finish our tales by telling you about one of the other cruises. In early 1913, John Buchan wrote to his friend the writer Hugh Walpole, "Susie and I are thinking of taking a long cruise to the Azores, and if so, I shall amuse myself writing a real shocker, a tribute at the shrine of my master in fiction, E. Phillips Oppenheim, the greatest Jewish writer since Isaiah." During the cruise, they sailed from Marseille through the Straits of Gibraltar and visited the Azores before returning to Lisbon and Santiago. It was during this cruise that John Buchan managed to write The Powerhouse, the first of the Edward Leethan novels. A scrapbook of this cruise with snapshots from the various places they visited is on show in the museum. Hopefully this presentation has given you some insight into the role John Buchan's holidays played with some of his novels. To get a fuller feel about this, visit the museum when it reopens, watch the website for word of this, and see the exhibition for yourself. Hope to see you soon.